Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to dive into something truly fascinating, the real-world origins of ancient Indian monastic law. When we look closely at this ancient text called the Ten Recitations Vinaya, what we find is pretty surprising. It's not some rigid, pre-planned rulebook handed down from the heavens. Actually, it's a highly reactive system that had to deal with the very messy, very real, everyday realities of human nature. So think about it. How do you actually maintain order in a massive, growing community of ancient spiritual seekers? Well, it turns out you basically just wait for someone to break the peace. The Buddha didn't just sit down and write out a comprehensive rulebook in advance. Not at all. Instead, he acted a lot more like a chief justice. He formulated laws reactively. He only established these legal precedents after a scandal, a massive dispute, or a physical danger had already happened within the community. So what we're really looking at here, it's literal ancient case law. Here is how we will structure our journey through the text today. First, we'll look at Buddhist monastic case law, then Parajika, or the ultimate expulsion, followed by covering up the truth, safety and social boundaries, avoiding secular lawsuits, and finally, the 10 core benefits. Section 1. Buddhist monastic case law. Let's start by looking at the incredibly structured legal process that underpins every single rule we're going to talk about. It's essentially a standard operating procedure. First up, an incident occurs. This usually happens when a monastic interacts with the lay world and, well, breaks the peace. Second, other monastics who practice stricter discipline catch wind of this and file a formal complaint. Third, the Buddha convenes the assembly and directly interrogates the accused person. And finally, based on their confession, a formal ruling comes down and a brand new law is established. Section 2. Parajika, or the ultimate expulsion. Now, let's talk about the absolute highest stakes in this ancient legal ledger. The worst-case scenario is committing a parajika offense. That word literally translates to defeat. And it's a huge deal because it means permanent removal from the community. If you commit a parajika, you lose your status immediately. You're no longer considered a monastic, and there is absolutely zero chance of reversal. No coming back. You are, quite literally, defeated. Our very first piece of case law involves a nun named Jonanantu. The text describes this intense mutual attraction between her and a layman, and she falls so deeply into longing for this guy that she actually becomes bedridden. Hearing about her distress, the layman decides to visit her private quarters, which leads to a secret rendezvous and prohibited physical contact. Of course, when the other nuns find out, it immediately triggers that four-step legal process we just discussed. And whenever one of these interrogations concluded and the accused confessed, the Buddha would deliver this incredibly specific, dramatic public rebuke. He'd say, "How can one be called a bhikkhuni, meaning a nun, and engage in such behavior?" This formal shaming was basically the preamble to laying down the law, making physical contact with a lustful man a severe offense. It was a stark, public reminder of the path they had chosen. But here's the thing, this ancient law wasn't just black and white. It really understood nuance and how behaviors build up over time. In another ruling, the text lists exactly 8 specific acts of flirtation and secrecy. We're talking about things like holding hands, standing together in a secluded spot, or waiting for a man while dressed in regular, non-monastic clothes. Committing just one of these was a lesser offense, but cumulatively committing all 8 specific acts, that triggered the ultimate parajika expulsion. It's brilliant, really. The system recognized that a massive failure is often just the sum of many small, unchecked compromises. Section 3. Covering up the truth. But it wasn't just about committing the act itself. This legal code was deeply concerned with the integrity of the institution. We see this play out in a really compelling case involving 2 sisters. The older sister commits a severe offense and leaves the order. But later, the younger sister, Nunmi Dali, admits she actually knew about the crime but kept quiet to protect her sibling and avoid a scandal. Well, the resulting ruling was incredibly strict. Covering up a major crime for even a single night was judged to be a full-blown parajika offense. Protecting a guilty party was seen as just as dangerous as the original crime. It just shows this incredible early understanding of how a cover-up can completely destroy institutional trust. Section 4. Safety and social boundaries. Moving past expulsion, we discover a fascinating layer of laws designed not as moral punishments, but as purely practical safety measures. To understand this, we have to look at the second tier of offenses, Sangha Diseza, which translates to suspension. This tier is honestly remarkable because it introduces the concept of rehabilitation and probation straight into ancient law. It's a severe offense, sure, but it's one that can actually be scrubbed clean if the person formally repents before the entire assembly. Comparing the two, we see a highly nuanced justice system. Parajika is an irredeemable break of trust. You're out. Sanghadisisa, on the other hand, acknowledges a correctable mistake. And what becomes incredibly apparent as you read the text is that a lot of the rules falling under this correctable category have entirely to do with nuns putting themselves in physically dangerous situations in the ancient world. These specific anecdotes show us exactly why these boundaries were drawn. We read about nun Shu Yu, who accepted food from a merchant who then aggressively demanded sexual favors. Or take nun Batu. She stayed overnight at her deceased sister's house and was immediately pressured by her brother-in-law to stay and become his wife. Then there's nun Shumuku, who boldly crossed a river alone, got stuck on the other bank, and was literally stripped by thieves in the night. So the resulting rules, don't take food from lustful men, don't sleep in lay houses alone, don't cross rivers solo, they weren't there to oppress anyone. They were literally written to keep these women from being assaulted, kidnapped, or robbed. Section 5. Avoiding secular lawsuits. Now things get even more intense when the internal rules of the monastery suddenly clash with the brutal, unforgiving reality of the state's secular justice system. Let's look at what is probably the most shocking case in the entire text. It starts off as a simple property dispute. A layman inherits part of an estate that includes a monastic dwelling, and he tells the nuns to leave. Nun Shumukwa argues back. The layman loses his temper and actually strikes her with his right hand. The nun then goes to the secular state magistrates to report him. Well, the magistrates consult secular law, which strictly decrees that striking an ascetic requires the amputation of the striking limb. So they literally cut off the layman's right hand. As you can imagine, this caused a massive public relations crisis for the ancient monastic order. The text actually notes that rumors spread like wildfire through the city that Buddhist nuns make people cut off hands. No way could they let that stand. So to maintain social harmony and avoid a total public uproar, a new rule was established immediately. The resulting law explicitly forbade monastics from weaponizing secular courts, officials, or royal power to settle their disputes. The spiritual community had to handle its own affairs internally. It's a perfect example of how reactive this rulemaking was to public perception. Section 6. The 10 core benefits. As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look at the ultimate synthesis of why all these strict rules were forged. Throughout the text, before laying down almost every single rule, the Buddha recites these 10 core benefits. Things like protecting the community, subduing the arrogant, ensuring peace, and inspiring faith. It proves the goal wasn't just to punish people or be oppressive. Not at all. These rules were literally the scaffolding required to build a safe, highly functional environment where people could actually focus on their spiritual journey, insulated from all that worldly chaos. So we've seen how ancient monastic law was reactive, protective, and highly structured just to navigate the messy realities of human nature. I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider. In our modern era, we almost always view rules as something that restricts our freedom, right? But how do strict boundaries and highly structured rules actually create freedom, safety, and harmony within the communities we build today? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.